Welcome back. As you can see, my company is here. Do I come here? Here. Here's the video star. There we go. You happy with that? Welcome back. Today, I thought we would catch up on where the landscaping project is going because it's moving very quickly. Fortunately for me, the fellow who's doing the landscaping contractor, is very nearby. He's like 3/4 of a mile up the road, and he's able and willing to get to work right away. So this is a good deal on one hand. On the other hand, I've got to scurry to make sure things are going the way they're supposed to. So we'll talk about that when we get back. Okay, well, a bad cat has vacated my lap. He is on the floor beating the crap out of my toe with his tail. Not sure what's going on about this. And of course, I have cat hairs in my nose again. Yeah, life as usual. Well, I thought what we would do is take a look today at what the worst parts of the yard are and what the first parts of the job to be done will be. So we're going to take a look at some of the plants that need to be relocated. Fortunately for me, since, as you know, I don't have much of a green thumb, there are not many plants that are going to need to be taken up. The reason they need to be taken up is because they are bringing in equipment. They're going to grade the soil and add new dirt in. There are a lot of areas they have to fill in. For starters, we have the crater from the X tree. Then we have all the ruts and grooves from all the heavy equipment that was in, not only for the removal of the tree, but for things like dropping off trusses for the roof on the schoolhouse and so on. So the first thing I thought we would do is just take a look at the plants that need to be relocated, because the plant relocator is coming probably today or tomorrow to dig these plants up and tuck them into a cool, shady spot of the yard. They only need to be there for a few days, and if they're going to be there for any length of time, of course, I'll just have to come out and make sure they stay moist. Usually, it's called healing in, and usually they just set them in the dirt, pile them up, get some soil on them. They're not dug into the ground, but they are just sort of slumped together with some dirt so they can be kept cool and moist, so they won't dry out, so that they can just be transplanted without too much in terms of ill effects. So let's start by taking a look at a little tiny mini garden that I started a couple of years ago. What I am doing in the yard today is documenting some of the present conditions, and I think in the future I'm going to want to look back at this and sort of remember what a mess it was. Right here is a section of some plants that I am hoping to save and relocate. We've got a fairly large fern in the background. We have daylilies, Amaracallus fulva. This is ditch lilies, ordinary, just roadside, the wild orange daylilies. And as you can see, because they are practically weeds, they're doing very well. And then over here, I have this really pretty hosta, which seems to be shooting up little baby things. I don't know what they are, but it's doing nicely. And since it has to be moved before anything is done in this part of the yard, I am really hoping to save this because it's so nice. This very weed-covered mess is actually a really nice climbing rose, and it's not going to be moved. It's going to stay here. The weeds are going to be pulled out, but that rose, I really do not think this rose would survive transplanting, and it's quite happy here. This is an extremely dark section of the yard, and the rose is blooming. So let's just sort of turn around so you can see. It is noon right now, and as you can see from this dense shade, this is what noon looks like in this side of the yard. It is no better at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m., believe me. So what we're going to do is go over to the fence line, where I have also been marking off some plants for removal. This mess that is running along the foundation of the schoolhouse, and of course, as you can see, up behind the planting bed and right across the back corner, was left by the construction company. When they did the remortaring, they just left the excess mortar behind. That entire little mini garden, with the exception of that climbing rose, it's just going to have to be taken out and relocated. It can probably go right back where it was, but they're going to have to be digging that area out. That particular area is, well, there's a lot of excess mortar that dripped off from where they were doing the brickwork on the schoolhouse, and that was never cleaned up. I think it should have been, but it wasn't. So there's that mess that has to be removed. Plus, there's a lot of other debris in that area, as I'm sure you noticed from the film, that this is sort of half debris and half soil. We need to get it back to soil, and then some mulch, and then we throw the plants in, and probably not quite as many plants as I originally put in there, because, as I'm sure you noticed, I overplanted, which, by the way, they say is the most common mistake among amateur gardeners, that they forget how much things are going to spread, how big plants are going to be. So, at least I'm not alone in that boo-boo. Well, the next thing I'd like you to take a look at is this is the northeast, my apologies, northeast corner of my yard. And the first thing you're going to notice is my neighbor's garage door leads out to my property. But I want you to pay close attention. The little piece of white PVC pipe in the ground in front of the garage door is the property marker. What's in there actually is a piece of rebar that's been driven in, and the PVC is just because, a piece of rebar sticking up is not safe. So that's just to keep people from hurting themselves or tripping on it. But if you'll notice, the property line between my property and the property owner immediately to the east of me, and that's the family whose son I attended his virtual wedding, remember? So you do know my neighbors. I have talked about them. Anyway, notice that the property line goes right through the garage door opening. Who knows what anybody was thinking about when they put the garage there. There is no right-of-way, there is no easement, and they don't use the garage door. So I think we are just going to do whatever we want to do in terms of landscaping in that area without any regard to somebody might want to come out of the garage. Doesn't seem to be happening. So let's take a look at that area. This area is a garage on my neighbor's side. It has a door here, but it doesn't have access through this side of the yard. And what we have in the mess down at the base of the garage door is a couple of ferns and another clump of my favorite orange ditch lilies. And I am hoping, again, that these two are going to be, well, I'm sorry, these TOO, not TWO. If I were going to do that, it would be these three, the two ferns and the clump of daylilies, are going to be salvaged and removed so they can be relocated elsewhere. Now this is the makeshift nest for the vulture eggs that was put up by the wildlife people. I'm going to have to give them a call and find out if they want their box back. I don't know if they do. I should think they would want that banding back, but the vultures have clearly abandoned this sort of makeshift nest. So absolutely, it's going to have to be removed. If they don't want it, it's going to go the way of all flesh, so to speak. Okay, and you saw the sort of makeshift nest for the vultures. They never came back. It's sad. The eggs are still in there. I'm sure the eggs are quite deceased now. That was unfortunate. These vultures are not bright. This is not the first time they've ended up laying their eggs somewhere that couldn't be made available to them. In other words, once the roof went on the schoolhouse, how are they even going to get in to tend their eggs? So the same thing happened. They moved into the African Methodist Episcopal Church up the street, which has been abandoned for many, many years, and it's sort of unsafe, and they've been working on the building. So they had to be relocated from that structure. I feel sorry for the poor vultures, even though, they were unnerving when they were perched up on top of the roof, daring anybody to go near the schoolhouse. But I certainly didn't want to see their eggs in jeopardy. But apparently they are just going to go off and lay their eggs somewhere else. Oh, yes, I know, baby. Lay their eggs somewhere else, and not a lot you can do. Well, the next area I want to show you is just a little bit of an afterthought, and it is the property line between the northern end of the east side of my property and the neighbors. And I do have one plant there. I'm going to put you down, sweetheart. I do have one plant there. It's a little struggling Mahonia bush. Originally there were 6. That is also the area that people came in with the heavy equipment to remove the tree. So one is there. We're going to leave it there and hope for the best, but what can I say? The rest of them were lost. It was going to be sort of a little hedge sort of affair, and it is now down to one bush. So if we want to do a little hedging, we're going to have to do it a little differently. So let's take a quick look at that. Now over here on the east side of the yard, we have a plant that I had put in a number of years ago. It's Mahonia, and actually there had been 6 of them running right along this line from that garage door right up to this tree area here. And this one is the only one that survived. I very much doubt it will manage to live through a transplanting. So we are going to try to keep it in situ. And that, by the way, was one of our words for the day some months ago. So keep that in mind. In situ simply means in its natural or original or normal position. And right here, in situ. So this one stays. The others will be relocated if we can. All right. Now, note, this is the fence. Now, I showed some footage of the fence taken over on my neighbor's side. and we've discussed this. The fence, panels of this fence have been blown down again and again and again by the winds. As you can see, it's like virtually none of the fence panels match, and some of them look to be coming down any time now. Well, the next thing I'd like you to see is the fence line. This is the fence that separates my property from the neighbor just to the north. And this is Robin, and we saw Robin's yard when I took you around to look at a couple of my neighbors' yards. Robin has the very, very plain, simple yard with just big, huge clumps of gorgeous hostas. Very, very low maintenance. Her fence is constantly buffeted by the winds, and I don't think more than 3 weeks, maybe a month, would go by last winter when she didn't end up losing a panel out of that fence. Wind just knocked it down. And as I showed you when I took some filming from the other side of her property, the north side, it's just open farmland there. So the wind just comes in, sweeps in off this small elevation, knocks down her fence. So this is why I have considered not putting a mulched bed in front of the fence. She needs to make this is her fence, not mine. She needs to make the decision about what she's going to do with it. And I don't know what she's going to do with it. At this point, I believe she wants to maintain a stockade privacy fence, in which case I have to consider my options because it will continue to be blown down. The fence is old. It's not in great shape. Now, mind you, she repairs it all the time, so I'm not trying to fault her in any way. And if you'll recall, I told you she came over and weeded my yard last fall. She is like a good neighbor, so I'm not going to say anything against her. But, she's a single woman, and she's coping as best she can. And the fence, she's shoring it up whenever there's a problem. But there's always a problem. And I do think the smart move is to pull every second or third picket and let wind come through the fence so that it's not just buffeting against the fence like that. But again, it's not my fence. It's not my call. This is hers. The fence is on her property. So whatever she wants to do, of course, I support her in whatever she wants to do. So it's just that I don't think it would be sensible of me to try to plant ornamentals, shrubs, flowers, whatever, along that fence line, at least not until we figure out what's going on with the fence. So the next thing I wanted to show you was the western end of the fence. And I'm not sure, when I filmed this, I might have said it was the eastern end of the fence. If I did, I was mistaken. It's the western end. And that's where the fence stops, turns into a hedge, and I have a few little ferns there, and then we're going to go over and take a look at where it is. We're going to relocate the plants. As I say, it's probably half a dozen ferns, some daylilies, and these are the regular ditch lilies that grow like weeds by the roadside, so they're not expensive and valuable. The only plant that really has any value at all is there's a pretty hosta that's going into this sort of plant refrigerator, if you will, to sit and wait for replanting elsewhere. Other than that, they're just coming in and plowing through pretty much everything. And as I say, everything that's in their way that I want to save has got to be removed. So let's take a look at that. The original plans The original plans for the section of yard along this fence had called for a mulched bed coming out at least a foot or two from the fence. But we are reconsidering that, mostly because, as you can see, the fence is very unstable. And what I don't want to do is get into a situation where if the fence falls over, it's going to be damaging new or expensive plants. If there is nothing but grass coming right up to the fence, yes, I will have to go through and edge it with a weed whacker. Not like I can't manage that. But, in fact, I will not have to worry. Grass is remarkably user-friendly when it comes to having fence posts fall on it. And we have had some problems. As I mentioned before, my neighbor is wonderful. I feel awful for her about what's going on with the fence. My idea is popping out every third or fourth picket, just take one out, to allow the wind to come through. But I believe she wants a privacy fence, and unfortunately, this is the price that you pay for it, especially when you're in an area of extremely high wind, which we are. We have a couple of other ferns here on this end. At this point, we are moving to the western end of the yard, and where I have those little reflectors are marking the ferns that will need to be dug up and relocated. There is also some bleeding heart in here too, which would be nice if we could save, but I'm not holding out a lot of hope for that. And I will show you what we're going to do with the ferns. This area right here, and it's under the pole that holds my electric meter, this area is always dark and cool, very shaded, very user-friendly for storing plants for a week or so. And as you can see, we've got a nice little area in here, and I think this is where the ferns and the daylilies are going to be stored. When the fellow comes from the landscaping service to dig them out, he will just take their entire root ball and drop the whole thing right in here somewhere, one right on top of the other. I will come out, it depends, if it's going to be 100-degree days, it will be several times a day, in order to make sure the roots haven't dried out, that the plants don't die. But this is probably where they will be stored. And we're just going to hope for the best. Fortunately, because it's 3 or 4 ferns and a clump of ditch lilies, basically, it's not going to be a major disaster if we have some losses. It would be nice if we could keep them, but if we can't, oh well, we can't. Now, I mentioned to my landscaper that I had an old water pump. It's probably at least 150 years old, and this pump came from the house across the street from me. It's a lovely pump. So let me show you a picture of the pump. So my landscaper showed me a picture that I don't know where he got it from, which is why I'm not using his picture. I went online, I got a similar picture that is, in the public domain. As I say, I don't know where his picture came from, and so I'm reluctant to use it. So he shot me a picture of a pump with little buckets and water and whatever. So let me show you what his idea was. Okay, so I countered with Jane. Remember Jane across the street, the one who does those beautiful little planting jobs and she's little mini gardens here and there? One of the things that Jane does is she puts together little pots of mixed plants. And let me show you a couple of pictures of one of her plants. She didn't do much this year. It was, the whole COVID thing. She couldn't get out to nurseries. So, and that was the only reason, by the way, just she's willing, but the nursery stock was not available to her this year. So let me show you the planter that she did this year. Now this is extremely dull for Jane's little mixed planters. So I'm sorry, I'm showing it to you on a bad year. But I went back to the landscaper and said, well, my neighbor is more than willing to help me put together a tub of flowers that will flow over the edges, like watery, because I don't want water running through my pump, because that sounds very high maintenance to me, and we have already established that that is just not my thing. So we're going to clean up the pump. Now you saw the pump. We're going to get it all cleaned up and painted. Not a problem. We'll probably film that. It'll probably be one of our project videos. And it will be located somewhere. And the landscaper, by the way, his name is Russ. So I don't want to keep referring to him as the landscaper. Okay, Russ, we'll figure out where we're going to put this. And then Jane will help me fill up a nice basket with flowers. And I already have the basket I'm going to use. So take a look at this. That is an old wash tub from approximately 1934. I know you're thinking, my goodness, Sue, how can you be so specific? Because it has the blue eagle from the NRA. By the way, NRA in this context does not mean National Rifle Association. It means National Recovery Act, one of FDR's programs prior to the Second World War. And the blue eagle was out from 33 to 35, and it's on this wash tub. So I can date it very specifically. So I think I'm going to use this beautiful little antique wash tub, and the pump will be there and flowers will spill out of it, and won't that be lovely? And I'm sure I can keep track of one basket of flowers. However, since I'm really not great at dealing with these plants, etc., and I was perfectly serious when I said I'm going to go over to something else, I thought, sort of on the way out as we trail off into the sunset, I would show you some pictures of some little birdhouses I picked up from Michael's online. Very inexpensive. I got the 3 of them for $17 and change, which, by the way, includes shipping. So let's take a look as we scoot out at what is going to be in my yard in lieu of flowers. I found 3 little birdhouses, and we are just going to go from there. All right, I will see you all Wednesday for Wordy Wednesday. Remember, I'm not doing a video tomorrow, but Wordy Wednesday, check on in. See y'all later.